So I know why we're here tonight and why we have such a large crowd. First of all, I guess I should say I'm also Karen Berman with Fired Up Pinellas. We've all seen the horrifying images from California, Chicago, and recently Minneapolis. There are countless other areas around the country that haven't received this kind of visibility. It's also important to note that atrocities have been occurring for decades for immigrant and migrant communities, and many of us are just becoming now aware. And for this, I'm personally sorry, and these marginalized communities now have my full attention. It's also long overdue that the immigration system in this country should be addressed politically and these inhumane tactics erased. I want to give a big thank you to Allendale, as always, for hosting us tonight and paving the way to abolish ICE and demanding that our city and its law enforcement sever ties with ICE. You will get further details about this initiative tonight. Thank you so much to Indivisible, Florida 13 St. Pete, League of Women Voters St. Pete, the Florida Institute for Community Studies, National Lawyers Guild, Tampa Bay Immigration Solidarity Network, Unimex, and Witness at the Border for being here tonight and for all you do to assist the community. I hope I didn't leave anybody out. It's time for us, as Andy said, to get informed, be prepared, and take action. Let me first, we're very honored tonight. Let me first introduce Kelly, who's a strong, brave, and determined person in her struggle to keep her family together. We want to express our deepest gratitude tonight for her for sharing her story and allowing us to know her truth. Her name is Kelly, otherwise known as Jacqueline Roman. She's a Mexican-American mother and businesswoman who was born in Houston, Texas. She devotes her time to running 4 businesses. I mean, Kelly, get it together. And for mothering 2 children of her own and 2 others. It takes a village, right? All between the ages of 3 and 16. Like many people in Clearwater, Kelly's family moved here from Esmilquipan, I hope I didn't butcher that, Hidalgo, which is the sister city to Clearwater. Kelly's husband is also from Hidalgo, and they've been married for 15 years, congratulations, and work together, which is a good feat. They're a mixed status family, US citizens and non-US citizens in the same family. And these families, as Elaine has told me, straddle 2 worlds every single day. Let's welcome Kelly to tell us her story. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for having me. As she mentioned, my name is Jacqueline Roman, and my friends and family call me Kelly. I stand here with strong faith and the power of prayer to tell you guys and share my story. I, like thousands of families, have struggled for over 15 years to navigate the process of having proper documentation, to being here right, doing it the right way. On November 7th, those 15 years of struggle and doing things the right way came ahead. My husband was stopped for driving without a license, and he was detained, taken to St. Pete, 49th Street, and detained by ICE. From there, he transferred to Alligator Alcatraz. In Alligator Alcatraz, he was denied due process. He had a court date, and in Alligator Alcatraz, they do not transport them to Crumbs Detention Center. He missed that court date and more postponed. His court was postponed. From there, he was transferred to Aurora, Colorado, where over a month went by. And at this point, Through the administration, their bonds are not being granted because my husband was considered iwi, entering without inspection. Iwis are detained with no, indefinitely. Luckily, through California's fifth court, a higher up court, they've revoked as of the end of this month, or the end of this month, was it? February. They have reinstated that hope for bond. He was, in fact, given a bond. Being home, when he was released at Alligator Alcatraz, they took his passport, and I had to drive to pick him up in Aurora, Colorado. They have 30 days to appeal, and in fact, I did receive an appeal for his bond, withdrawal for his bond. This has been, as you guys can imagine, mentally, emotionally, and financially draining. All of our plans have been put on hold. My children have suffered. I have suffered immensely, and this is all because of cruelty. There is no proper path or easy way, right way. Every way I'm now starting from step zero. All of our 15 years, all of the waiting, all of that doesn't matter. I have to now present a new way of relief, present new evidence because of that date. I'm here to share my story I'm not the only one. There's thousands of stories just like mine. What else? Where did I leave off?
You want to ask people?
Oh, I want to have a call.
But you want to tell them about, like, lawyer, that you had a lawyer.
Oh, I did have representation, and the lawyer was able to. I lost my place. I kind of went off script. Sorry about that, guys. We're.
I think you have, but you covered it all. You're very organized. Yeah, the scammers.
Oh, through the process of having to start from scratch, numerous attorneys, consultation costs, scammers that are taking advantage of our community, taking advantage of our desperation, and wanting to reunify my family together. I've encountered so much time and money was lost with these people, and so that's something important because you're so focused and you're so trying to find a way, and that was something I really wanted to highlight. So my story is a story of injustice. It's not, like I said, not the only one. This is a story of thousands of people that ultimately what I want is for my family to stay together. My family, if it's here, that would be amazing. If I have to leave back, then that's what we'll do. But this is so that we can have a pathway and change, have current legislation for immigration so that we can do it much easier, not this red tape and everything, this bureaucracy that I have encountered. And so my call is that all of us have our voice to be behind the people that are scared, that don't have the resources, and that don't expect this here in the United States of America. This isn't supposed to happen, but it does. It happens, and it's happening. Anything else?
Do you want to talk about the last week, the guy that just...
Oh, and so in this process with my husband, we've met many people along the way. And most recently, someone, again, trying in desperation, my name was given. And this family has been here for over 30 years. The gentleman is elderly. He has medical conditions. He is an alligator Alcatraz, and they are, in fact, denying him his proper medication. And he and my husband have several stories of people here with proper documentations, and they are still being detained. And so he needs, for his release now, because the bonds have been reinstated, the bonds are starting at $20,000. And his family doesn't have the means to do that. And so that story is, that is the most recent one that I've encountered with this whole process. Thank you for your time, and just we have to reach out to our congressmen and have our voices heard, please.
Thank you so much again, Kelly, for speaking. I know she doesn't hear me, but because she's hearing from other people. But to put a face, to put a voice with some of these atrocities and challenges, we so appreciate you being here and sharing your story and other people's story with us. It's really important to hear from you all, so thank you. Take a deep breath. You did great. You did great. Next, we have two people that have been not only talking the talk, but walking the walk and doing the work, and we really appreciate them very much. We've got Miranda Margolis, sometimes known as Mira, and Elaine Unterberger. Yay, I pronounced that correctly. Miranda is an attorney at the law firm Trentline and Kelly, and is a member of the steering committee for the National Lawyers Guild, Tampa Bay chapter. The National Lawyers Guild, if you're not familiar, they've got a table back there, but it's a progressive public interest association of lawyers, law students, paralegals, jailhouse lawyers, law collective members, and other activist legal workers in the United States. Miranda previously served as a staff attorney for the 13th Circuit Court of Florida, and we thank her for being here. And then Elaine is an applied medical anthropologist working at the intersection of health, migration, and gender. She's been the executive director of the Florida Institute for Community Studies, FICS, F-I-C-S, and they also have a table back there for 24 years. Their bio that they shared with me, they're very brief, and I know that they've done far more than what I've just spoken about, but we welcome them for coming here tonight and sharing their combined experience and expertise to let us know a little bit more about what's happening here in Florida and how we can prepare ourselves. So let me welcome Mira and Elaine.
All right, so this is going to be partially a Know Your Rights and Know Your Risks presentation, but Elaine and I thought it would be most helpful to start with a little bit of historical background and context, speaking about community and what that can look like, because we keep us safe, right? So I don't know who's... All right, excellent, thank you. So it is Black History Month. It's February. So some of you, most of you, perhaps all of you are familiar with the story of Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycotts. Rosa Parks certainly was the face of that. She refused to give up her seat when the bus driver told her to give up her seat on the bus for a white man. She was actually the third local woman to refuse to give up her seat and be arrested. around that time. It was decided by some of the local organizers, including Dr. King, that Rosa Parks would be best to put forward in the media. I mention this because as we're seeing news stories, right, we're seeing stories out of Minneapolis and California and Chicago, tragic deaths. We had 2 back-to-back in Minneapolis that were reported on. But for every story that we see in the news, there are thousands more that we don't. And there is just hours and hours and hours of work being done behind the scenes for each of those. So I don't know if you're able to see the dates there, but the Montgomery bus boycott lasted for more than a year. Black residents of Montgomery made up 75% of bus riders. And so when they decided to stop riding the bus, that made a pretty big financial impact. For more than a year, they didn't ride the bus. They rode bicycles, they walked, they carpooled. They received, in today's money, a $60,000 donation from the United Auto Workers Union. They received donations of shoes from various congregations. A lot of work and planning and organizing went into this so that this entire community could stop taking the bus for more than a year. And that is why we still remember Rosa Parks' story today, not just for what she did, but what her entire community did. And for that longevity and that commitment, right? Most of us can't and won't be Rosa Parks, but we can donate shoes, and we can carpool, we can give rides, we can give time. And I think that is the role that most of us can, will, and should have. So I'm going to pass it off to Elaine next for a little bit more historical context.
All right, everyone. I was asked to ask you if you have seen anything that looks like ICE or maybe State Patrol, the troopers, or have you seen any of the sheriff's office pull people over? Have you seen any arrests? Okay. And did you wonder how you could report that? Yeah, okay. So that's one of the things that I was asked. We got some people who've seen some stuff. It's really hard to see that, right? And it makes you feel really powerless, like this is happening and I can't stop it. And what we really want to do is just kind of start all over again, just like Mira said, like what was behind the scenes with Rosa Parks and with a lot of our huge movements has to be built. And so I think we have to unlearn some things. First of all, as you think about what is the history that we are taught about America and immigration, right? We're taught it's a melting pot. Raise your hand. Melting pot, remember? Okay. You guys can move around, really, honestly. We can have a conversation. So we were taught a melting pot, right? We were taught this whole story about Thanksgiving, right? Like, oh, well, the Pilgrims and the Indians, they were friends and they ate together. A lot of these things that we have learned, we kind of have to unlearn, right? Because the reality is that this is a settler colonial model. And when I say that, I'm not saying that to hurt anyone's feelings, but if we're not Native American, we are not the native people of this land, which means that this is a model of colonization. And so the only way you can have immigrants is if you're pushing people out. So when you have manifest destiny, for example, that we have the God-given right to settle this whole place from coast to coast, no one questioned it, right? Well, that's not true. There were questions. But there's a lot of context that I think we don't learn in our education. Can we agree on that? And I'm not saying you all have to be radical and like against, anything that we've learned before, but this is the context. So on here we have a few dates about, coming the right way has always been hard in America. Let's just be honest. Ellis Island was not built because we wanted to have this haven for immigrants. it was built as a hospital. It was built to screen people out. And on here in the 1891 law, that was one of the things that it did. It had a very strict mandate, which was to see how we were going to have safety with all of these people coming over. And that was really the first kind of legislation, and it also included the Chinese Exclusion Act. Does anybody remember that, Chinese Exclusion Act? Okay, and that was after we'd already built the railroads with the Chinese, and then they had to leave. Okay, so next slide, please. So there's always been a lot of these great history of like cartoons and ways that we've looked at immigration, but the 1880s to the 1940s or the 1980s really, Ronald Reagan changed a lot related to immigration. But ironically, he also passed IRCA, which regularized almost 12 million people in the 80s into the 90s. So, we have this idea of the push-pull. Have you heard of this concept before? So America has a need for immigrants, so we pull them. But we also have a push from the countries where there's destabilization or they're not safe. And that push and the idea that we accept people here is related to labor. And so that's why the history of immigration in America is really a history of labor. And the first place in the government that dealt with immigration was the Department of Labor. And a lot of people don't know this because we're not taught it, but I've been studying this and I got fascinated, one of those things you can't stop reading about, right? I'm kind of a nerd, but anyway, here we have the whole crux of it. So there were three things that we really looked at for immigration, and it was this idea of work labor or keeping families together, which was more, in words than in actually actions. And then the idea of the quotas, because we did have quotas. We have always had quotas, even if they weren't really published. Next slide. I don't know how, can you guys read that purple thing? Okay, the numbers are still there. This is a slide that just kind of explains how immigrants have changed over time. And I've given a lot of these talks, and I think if any of you were with the, North County Pinellas Women? Are any of you with them? I gave a talk last year about immigration. But I like this slide because it shows you just how it's changed. It's really showing you we don't really have that many more immigrants now than we ever had, but they're just coming from different places, right? And there's some sources that are great, but there's some sources that are really not great, and there's one that really, 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 please do not use because it gives them legitimacy, and that's the Center for Immigration Studies. Fox News uses them all the time. They're part of the Project 2025. Yeah, CIS. It's on the slide. I can make the slides available. Or Karen, you can make the slides available, right? I'm sure. I stuck two slides together. But I don't want to go over my time. So basically, I can't even read it. My eyesight is not that good. Oh, be careful also of ChatGPT and some of the AI scrapers because they are factoring in numbers that are kind of, I don't know how to say this, but it could change the way you would look at the numbers of immigrants and the unauthorized immigrants. That's the new word for undocumented is unauthorized. And I think the last point was, yes. Kelly, I think, already did a great explanation of this, but Kelly was born here to parents who immigrated in the 80s. And they're all from this place called Izmiquilpan, which I want to go visit because I hear about it all the time. But there are so many people. I would say there's at least, 5,000 families, maybe more, in Clearwater who are all from the same place. So it's not strange that her husband would come from the same place and then he would have a mixed status. So that just means that there's one person in the family who might be undocumented while the rest of them are. And often if you have US-born children, then you are affecting US-born children when you have these policies that affect people who are also lacking proper authorization. And it used to be a lot easier to get into a way to obtain citizenship through marriage, like in Kelly's case. But it's been made harder and harder since 2016. And so it takes about 30 years now. I just have one of my last thing. Is there another slide? I don't think there is. Is there? Oh, yeah, that one slide. Okay. So I went off last night on this tangent, so about the new Jim Crow. Has anybody read that book? It's a little bit older now. Yeah, you read it. It's a great book. And she actually, I learned so much in this book because she goes over like what happened during Jim Crow and how it was all legal. All of the things that happened, you know, the voting tests and keeping people from being able to vote, it was a long game. And also that the police in the South, it's not the same. The case of Florida is not the case of Minnesota. You know, we're not probably going to have ICE because we already have DeSantis having the troopers do their work. We don't need ICE here because we have 287G. So, you know, the slave patrols were the beginnings of the sheriff's offices in all of the South and some of the West. So these are some of the things that we see police in different ways in the South, and they're showing up. We don't need ICE. You will know ICE. You will see them. They have like vans, or they have larger SUVs, white or black, and they'll just be parked. They usually come from Enterprise Rent-A-Car. That's where they have their federal contracts with. But it's all about, you know, supporting what's already happening in Florida. They don't need to be here en masse. So we have to think about what is our strategy when it is the sheriffs. And I'm always telling, and Kelly knows, I'm always telling the families, you can't trust any of them. Like, there's like, algunos son buenos. No. With DeSantis, everybody had to sign on to 287G. So, with that, I'm leaving it back to Mayor.
Thank you, Elaine. I feel very fortunate to, yeah. I feel very fortunate to be able to work alongside an anthropology professor. Elaine is absolutely brilliant. Yeah, so like Elaine was saying, part of the reason the historical context we feel is relevant is when we're thinking about policing, when we're thinking about ICE, when we're thinking about 287G, this didn't come out of nowhere, right? This is just another chapter in a long history of the United States and how it was built on a system of racism and racial profiling and taking labor from others so that, you know, the elite can benefit, you know, the white elite can benefit. And this is an extension of that. So I think we can go on to the next one. Yeah, privilege, yes. So when, and you know, I think most of the folks in this room do engage with the police with a level of privilege. I know that I do. And I know that that can be a bit of a scary word, or perhaps not scary, an uncomfortable word for people, you know, because it's hard. It's hard out there. The economy's not doing great. You know, my son screamed at me the whole way here, and we sat in traffic, and I did not feel very privileged during that drive. But the way that I tend to frame it for myself and for others is if I were to get pulled over during that drive, the thing that I'm afraid of is getting a ticket, right? I can't afford a $300 ticket right now, and that would really suck. But that's not what everybody's afraid of when they get pulled over. You know, black folks might be afraid of getting shot. Immigrants might be afraid that they're going to be taken to an ICE detention center and they'll never see their families again. And so that is the privilege that I am driving with, that's not what I have to be afraid of while I'm driving. And so I know that a lot of folks here are interested in perhaps doing legal observing, or I've heard that there's some interest in doing ICE Watch. And so I wanted to bring this up because the ways that we engage with the police will impact the ways that the police engage with our neighbors, right? That we might get riled up and scream at the sheriff and make him really mad, and then the sheriff's department will turn around and take it out on a black neighborhood or an immigrant neighborhood, right? And we don't want that. So it's something that when we're engaging with law enforcement should always be kind of at the forefront of our minds, that this dynamic exists. We go on, thank you. Yep. So Elaine mentioned 287G. I'm guessing most folks here are familiar with it, but not everyone, and probably not kind of the nuts and bolts. Well, I'm not I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts, but the federal government is not allowed to force state law enforcement to enforce federal laws, right? So that's why we're seeing in California, in Minnesota, places where the state has not largely agreed to help with immigration enforcement. I believe California has outright refused up and down the state. As you can see on this map, all those little dots are jurisdictions with 287G agreements. And so those are places where local law enforcement has agreed to assist ICE, right? And geographically, there's a pattern here. So I did have some requests, especially after seeing the news from Minneapolis and the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. For what can we do to stay safe from ICE, and when is Tampa going to look like Minneapolis? And I don't have a crystal ball, but just looking at this map, I'm guessing not anytime soon, right? Because ICE doesn't need to do that here. Our local law enforcement is doing it for them. I have done my best to assist, and unfortunately have not been able to do nearly enough for a few families. Sometimes Elaine will call me, sometimes it'll be the middle of the night, and somebody's been arrested for a broken taillight, or driving an unregistered vehicle, driving without a license. It happens every day. So it'll be Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, Hillsborough, and they see that this person has a deportation order because they missed an appointment. This story is so common. And they get taken to Pinellas County Jail, and within 48 hours, the feds come and take them away. Most of the time, whatever criminal charge doesn't even get processed. It used to be that the person could go through, if there was an actual criminal allegation, go through probation or whatever the terms were and go back to immigration court, Not the case now. They are very good at coming within that 48-hour window, because that's what ICE has. I guess, yeah, we can go on to the next one. So to that end, because we can't necessarily watch every police car, right? It's just realistically not possible. What we can do are things to keep our neighbors safe generally, and this is part of the reason I brought up Rosa Parks at the beginning, right? That some of the bigger things and more visible things maybe aren't our things to do, but bringing food to families who are afraid to be on the road, driving families to the doctor when they don't have a registered car, donating Lyft gift cards so they can get their own ride, right? These are things that we can do, because every person who doesn't have to get behind the wheel of a car is not going to get stopped, right? And it may not be perfect, it may not save everybody, it probably won't, but if enough people are helping, I believe it can make a difference. Yes, we can. Yeah, so with all of that said, we can get into some of the know your rights and know your risks. So the first one I have is just a general overview of your constitutional rights with regard to specifically police interactions. A good friend of mine often says, another member of NLG, that you can have all the rights in the world and it won't matter. If the cops decide that you're going to jail, you are going to jail. If they decide that they are going to tear gas you, they're going to tear gas you. If they're going to shoot you, they're going to shoot you. What your rights do is they help you when you get to the courtroom, right? In terms of the criminal charges being dropped, in terms of perhaps having a civil suit against the municipality. So it's important to know your rights, but that's why we say know your rights and know your risks. So I think we're all familiar with, the Fifth Amendment. You have the right to remain silent, Miranda rights. And we'll go into these in more detail. The Fourth Amendment guarantees your right to exist in your home or in your car without the police conducting warrantless searches, and there are some exceptions to that. Fourth Amendment case law could take a whole semester. If anybody's interested, we can chat later. And I included the First Amendment because it has been coming up a lot in the context of protests, and especially for immigrants, who are wanting to exercise their First Amendment rights, because these rights are not just for American citizens, they're for everybody who is here. That you have a First Amendment right to express ideas and to assemble, to meet in community, right? Okay, so I think we covered all that. We can go on to the next one. Okay, remaining silent. This is a big one. Now, oftentimes you'll see on social media attorneys saying, don't say anything, don't answer any questions. And if that's the only piece of advice that you hear, that's not the worst advice. But since we're doing Know Your Risks, I would say use your best judgment. If you're stopped and the officer asks, how's your day going? You can say, good, how's your day, officer? That's not going to incriminate you. What it might do is put the officer at ease, right? There are certain questions that you have to answer. So if they ask for your name, don't provide a fake name. If you're driving and they ask for your license, give them your license. If you are going to exercise your Fifth Amendment right, I would recommend saying that specifically. I am exercising my Fifth Amendment right to stay silent because I've been arrested, not for anything fun. They weren't very nice, to put it mildly. I'm gonna go on a little tangent here. I know some of you here tonight may have family members and neighbors who are law enforcement officials. We might even have some law enforcement officers here with us this evening. Thank you for listening to the presentation, and I hope that we're all learning something together here. But there is predominantly across the country a training that they receive, that this mentality of us versus them. And I've heard other attorneys express concern about police officers referring to us as civilians, right? This is not a war zone. They are not the military. So in that context, the word civilian is concerning, right? That they, in many ways, are trained to believe that all of us here are liars, that we're all secretly holding weapons, that we're all out to get them and they can only trust each other. And I know that's not the case. I know my neighbors. I know my neighbors are good people. I'll get into this a little later, but that is also, when I am interacting with law enforcement, something that's at the forefront of my mind, that they have been trained to think that I'm a liar and that we're all liars and that we're all armed, right? So to that end, another thing that I think can be safe and can be a good idea to say, if you are being arrested, and especially out of your car, you can tell them that you don't have weapons on you. In fact, I would recommend doing so. So when I was arrested, they asked me, is there anything in your car we should know about? I said, no weapons, because I didn't have any. They believed me. I didn't give them probable cause to search my car. They could have. And we'll get into that, I think, on the next slide with searches. But under those circumstances, use your best judgment. But if you are going to answer honestly and keep it short, right? We can go on to the next one. Probable cause, yes. So closely related to that, and part of the reason that we don't want to volunteer a bunch of information is probable cause. So these are the circumstances where your home, your person, your car can be searched without a warrant, right? Because the Fourth Amendment says they can't come in and search you without a warrant. So in Florida, you can be searched without a warrant as part of a lawful arrest, right? So DUI is perhaps an easy example. You're weaving all over the road, you get pulled over, they pull you out of your car, and they can search your person and your immediate vicinity, so your vehicle. And they say that it's for weapons, right, for officer safety. But anything they find at that point is fair game because it's a lawful search. So the Fifth Amendment and Fourth Amendment go together here. When you get pulled over, they'll often ask, do you know why I pulled you over? I answer no. They might have pulled me over to tell me they like my hair. I don't know. I'm not psychic. Because whatever you say is now their probable cause, right? And you have a Fifth Amendment right not to answer. And you don't know why they pulled you over, right? None of us are psychic. If they pulled you over for a reason, they can tell you what that is, right? But so if you are thinking about things like carpools, right? And we're gonna get into that a little bit more later as well. I know I keep saying that. Thinking about the Fourth and Fifth Amendment together, if you have other people in the car with you, other people who might be vulnerable because of their race, because of their gender, because of their immigration status, again, that you might walk away from this police encounter unscathed, but they might not, your passengers might not, right? And so that's why this is so important. You as the driver have to present your driver's license, but your passengers do not. And if they don't have probable cause to search your car and they don't have a warrant, then they can stay out of your car. Yep. You can ask them for a warrant the same as you would in your home. Which I know I'm sorry, I'm a little all over the place tonight. Thank you for being with me. So we can go on to the next one. Oh, see, this is all tying together so nicely. Warrants. If they do have a warrant, if you say, can I see a warrant, and they have one, you want to look for several things. And this is true in any context. I know that we see this a lot again on social media in the context of immigration, but this is across the board. You want to see which court it's from. If it's a state court, it'll say the 13th Judicial Circuit or the 6th Judicial Circuit. So here in Pinellas, that's the 6th Circuit. If it's federal, it'll say the Middle District of Florida. You want to look for the dates that it's good for. You want to look for the names, persons, places, and things, because warrants have to be specific, right? It can't just say a warrant to search the entire house for anything we might want to look at. It's got to be more specific than that. And you also want to look for the signature of a judge. So if it has all of those things, that is a lawful warrant, and they can come in and search. But typically they'll lead with that if they have one, right? And if there is no warrant, and even if there is, you can say, I do not consent to a search. I would even recommend saying that anyway, right? Because as a lawyer, I'm always thinking about how is this going to present in court, right? That's part of the reason it's very important not to lie to law enforcement, right? And to assert your Fifth Amendment right rather than just remaining silent. Because all of that is going to eventually get in front of a judge, and so they can look at the whole set of facts together. So I think that's good on warrants. Yes, recording interactions. See, I planned ahead. I love this. Florida is a two-party consent state. So typically, in order to record someone, they have to consent to being recorded, right? It's not enough for me to just, turn on my phone. There is an exception for audio recordings in public places and places where people can anticipate being overheard, essentially, that they don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy. So if you are interacting with a law enforcement officer in a place where anybody could overhear, there's somebody, they don't have to be listening, but somebody close enough that they could hear the conversation, you can record the audio. And so I've seen people, point the camera down at the ground so the audio of the interaction is going. You can also start a phone call with someone, right? And what I would recommend doing is informing the officer, saying, I am recording, for safety and for record keeping. This is being recorded. So that way, if you need to use the video, that we've checked all the boxes, right? Yeah, we can go on to the next one. Yeah, so there is also, and this is I typically do training for legal observers, and if anybody's interested in that, we can chat later. Legal observers go out to any First Amendment activity, protected First Amendment activity, and we wear the neon hats and observe law enforcement, essentially, to document any potential civil rights violations. And so this one, I think, is perhaps more relevant there, but if you are observing a law enforcement interaction where you are not the suspect, you are not the detainee, Florida has this HALO law that upon request, you have to move at least 25 feet away from whatever law enforcement is doing. It's not automatic. They have to tell you to get back. So I put the statute here. Some of the wording is very specific. And now I can't see it. I'm having the same issue Elaine was. But it's not just being within 25 feet. There has to be more to it for it to violate the statute. They're specifically talking about interfering with an arrest, right? I have some thoughts on this because I can't imagine most people by sight could estimate 25 feet. But again, in that circumstance, use your best judgment. And what I tell the legal observers is, we're not here to make trouble for other people. We're not here to put other people in danger. If the cops tell you to go across the street, go across the street, right? That we don't need to get in a fight with the police and make it so that they're taking out their anger and frustration on somebody else. But I thought this was good to include, good to know that is, and it might be worth getting out a tape measure at home and just seeing, 25 feet. I should probably do that too. So you have an idea, of what 25 feet looks like. We can, thank you. Yep. So the last kind of piece that I was considering, because I did have an ask specifically about, ICE Watch and recording ICE, and I have grouped law enforcement generally into that because we have 287G, because this is Florida. The only other thing I could think of that people might run afoul of if they are recording police interactions is online bullying or harassment laws, or like cyberbullying, doxing. So again, kind of like with the HALO law, there are additional requirements that the statutes have, and there's federal and state. That it's just posting a picture of someone isn't necessarily cyberbullying or doxing, and these are relatively new. I believe the Florida statute was 2024, so we haven't got a nice stack of case law interpreting these statutes for us. But yeah, so it's, we see threatening or harassing the victim, inciting violence or a crime against the victim, right? So just posting a photo of someone wouldn't necessarily be those things, right? For NLG, for legal observers, we don't take photos. I don't post photos of people. It's not generally something I would recommend, but I thought this was worth mentioning, just so it can be on everyone's radar, because I know a lot of people have been wanting to do that. They see something happening and they share, and it can be useful. So that's just one of those. I think this is more a know your risk rather than know your right. That if you do decide to share, just be mindful that it could be taken badly, and you could wind up on the wrong side of the courtroom there, which actually brings me all the way back around to Rosa Parks and Dr. King and the other bus boycott organizers. One part of the story that I rarely hear mentioned is that the organizers were prosecuted essentially for price fixing with the boycott, right? That there are often unintended and unexpected consequences when we as a community decide to take action against oppressive forces, right? The oppressive forces oppress back, that's what they do. And we can't always predict how they are going to do that, right? So when I was asked, like, oh, well, what can we expect? I'm like, I can tell you historically what's happened, I can tell you what the rules are, but I can't tell you necessarily what they're gonna throw tomorrow, right? I'm sure that the bus boycott organizers were not anticipating essentially RICO charges, but that is what happened. So I think there's one more. I think there was another. Oh yes, harboring. This one's very important. Right. So we talked about carpooling. We talked about your Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights, police interactions. And we talked about knowing your risks, right? Because the law, in the moment that you're dealing with law enforcement, the law is whatever they believe it to be. Once you're in a courtroom, the law is what it says on the paper and what the judge says, but in that moment, it's what the police say. So, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, and it's there on the screen, and I can't read it, but Scott Warren, thank you. So Scott Warren was arrested for distributing water at the border, spent 2 years in jail. Eventually, it was found that distributing water is not harboring, that it is in fact humanitarian aid, which is permitted. But he spent 2 years in jail before that was determined, right? Just because something is legal doesn't mean you won't go to jail. And that's, I think, one of the most important things to remember. And at the end of the day, being white and middle class isn't going to keep you out of jail either if they want to make an example of you, right? So specifically, the federal harboring statute prohibits transporting an undocumented person over the border or within the United States for the purpose of evading law enforcement. And I'm paraphrasing some of that. I encourage you to look at the specific wording of the statute yourselves. But that is the essence of it. So humanitarian aid has been found to not be harboring, so handing out water. NLG also says that activities like assisting somebody with getting medical care is a low-risk activity. Giving somebody a bus ticket for the purposes of family reunification would be a low-risk activity, right? And there is also the knowingly portion of that too. And this has been my general policy for many years, and I would recommend that we as a community try to adopt it. I don't ask people what their immigration status is. I don't ask because I don't want to be rude, but also if you don't ask, then you don't know, and you can't knowingly harbor someone if you don't know, right? So the harboring statute is very specific in terms of what's legal and what isn't. But I'm not going to stand here and promise anyone that just because the activity is legal doesn't mean that you won't be arrested. So, that's part of the reason knowing how to interact with law enforcement safely, keeping things like privilege in mind, and keeping in mind the ways that law enforcement has been trained to interact with us as the quote-unquote civilians, that is largely what is going to keep us safe and our neighbors safe. Yeah.
Let's give a big round of applause for everybody on the stage. So that was awesome. Obviously, we've got a number of organizations in the back of the room that can engage you guys in legal observing, petitions for 287G, all kinds of other information. So please visit the back of our tables to get engaged. Also, check out the slides for Save the Dates. There were two nice people in the back of the room that gave some corrections for No Kings protests. If you take a picture, just remember that some of the times are off. So check Mobilize or Pinellas protests. St. Pete is from 10:30 to noon. Gulfport 12 to 1:30. Clearwater 10 to 12. Largo 10 to 12, and Brandon 1 to 3. So we're just making sure you're paying attention, giving you some odd times, but double check those. But feel free to join these No Kings protests because it's all about engaging any way that we can. Certainly thank you all for being here. Don't forget to visit the back of the tables. I know there's a lot of people here, but feel free to go and get engaged. We're all here to do something, so thank you all for being here again.